Now, the latest from ITV News Meridian with Fred Dinage and Sangeeta Barbara.
Good evening, welcome to ITV News Meridian.
Tonight's headlines in the south. Where have they gone? The campaign to help find missing people and the families left waiting for news.
It's the not knowing that everybody says is the hardest thing.
Searching for a cure, the University of Sussex scientists on the front line of dementia research.
The artist who's had a brush with the law, he says his look-alike masterpieces are not fakes.
And they're the Feathered Friends with a sweet song. The Nightingales being fitted with tiny backpacks. Good evening to you. 24 years after her teenage son disappeared, a mother from Surrey has described the ongoing pain of not knowing what happened to him.
Yes, in 1992, 18-year-old Quentin Godwin left his home for work and never came back. And he's not alone. In our region, there are more than 100 people registered as missing. They include Stephen Lockyer from Romsey, not seen since April. Vera Hosagidi from Worthing, who went missing 9 years ago when she was 16.
And Damien Nettles, last seen on a night out in Cowes almost 20 years ago. So how do families cope? Emma Wilkinson has been to hear one mother's story.
Quentin went missing when he was 18, so he was at that time a fairly typical teenager. But he was a very country-loving person. He loved gardening, he loved beekeeping.
This is where Sarah Godwin feels closest to her son. Her garden, amongst the flowers and the bees. In 1992, the family were living in New Zealand. While Sarah was visiting her parents here, on the other side of the world, her son was saying goodbye to his sister and leaving for his after-school job. He never came back.
First of all, you're thrown into complete chaos because it's an emotional sort of tempest that blows everything else out the window. You don't know whether they're alive or dead. It's the not knowing that is the hardest thing.
Over years, they've searched far and wide for Quentin, often in wild terrain. They discovered afterwards he was going through a period of depression, but Sarah says there were no obvious signs that he wanted to leave at the time. There have been leads. She's followed up on every single one.
We've had a girl phoning us up twice in New Zealand in the 90s saying she was married to him, had his baby. We went to the house and the people denied any knowledge of it. So it's like slamming up against a brick wall the whole time.
Sarah had little support for a long time until she turned to the charity Missing People. She sings in the Missing People choir. Celebrities including Chesney Hawkes have joined the choir on a new single called I Hope.
I'm a father of 3 and you couldn't really imagine anything worse happening to a family. Singing it was difficult because, you know, I always like to live my lyrics and really had put myself in that position when I was singing, and I kept choking up. I could hardly sing it.
The single is being released ahead of International Missing Children's Day. Money raised will go towards the Missing People charity's Find Every Child campaign. For Sarah, being involved with the charity has helped her cope.
I can talk about it now in a way that I wouldn't have been able to talk about it for probably the first 10 years. But it's all there. The bottom line is you miss the person. I miss my son.
But Sarah will never give up hope of finding answers and will never stop looking for her child. Emma Wilkinson, ITV News, Dunsfold.
In other news, 2 men from Hove have been convicted of grooming and sexually abusing 12 teenage girls in Littlehampton. 31-year-old Osman Karoma, seen here on the left, and Maxon Gaza, who's 25, have been convicted of a total of 18 sexual offences between them. Some of their victims were as young as 13. They will be sentenced next month.
A woman in her 70s has been killed by a lorry while she was in a lay-by on the A31 in the New Forest. She was airlifted to hospital after the collision between Burley and Picket Post shortly before 8 a.m, but later died. The eastbound carriageway was closed for several hours, which caused long delays for drivers, with queues stretching back to the A338 Salisbury Road.
A cash box containing £12,000 has been stolen when a security guard was attacked with a baseball bat in Southampton. It happened at the Bitton Road precinct near Domino's on Monday morning. Police are linking it to another robbery at Ladbrokes on Butts Road the night before, where money was stolen from a till.
1 in 14 people over 65 and 1 in 6 over 80 has dementia. But new research in our region is hoping to combat these devastating illnesses.
Well, some of this work's been done at the University of Sussex, where a build-up of proteins on the brain that affects sufferers is being studied.
And in this Dementia Awareness Week, members of the public have been invited to see their work close up. Here's Andy Dickinson.
Janet and Andy Gunbrill from Hove study these rudimentary examples of how our brains work with dementia. At just 58, Janet was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's 2 years ago. They're here looking for hope.
We had bad days, quite a few bad days, but you've just got to get up and get on with it. I mean, that's why I've been fortunate to retire now, so I stay at home and look after Jan and just basically get up, do everything for her.
Also, because we've still got children, it's almost, we have to do it for them.
But the fight to beat these devastating illnesses is a long and arduous one. Scientists at the University of Sussex at the front line of research into the most complex structure known to man.
If you look at the brain of a healthy individual and the brain of somebody that has Alzheimer's disease, you'll see these big holes in it. And we think that this protein aggregation and these proteins all sticking to each other and forming these clumps is what causes these holes to appear. We really need to understand the molecular level of Alzheimer's disease, because the drugs that have been made so far haven't been very effective, and the reason for this is because we don't understand it at a very detailed molecular level.
Nearly everybody knows somebody or is affected by this disease, and it's something that we really want to tackle. And I think that it's something that the government should really be stepping up towards, because it's obviously something that's economically damaged but also socially damaging.
The more research and the more they're looking into it, you know, the quicker hopefully something will be detected and they might be able to find a cure for it. But that's probably going to be years to come, because the brain is such a complex thing and it's not easy to delve in there and find out what's going wrong as such.
The more we understand about dementia, experts say the more we can do to help. Janet is herself taking part in drugs trials, helping to find a cure that is so desperately needed. Andy Dickinson, ITV News, Brighton.
More than a third of children in Southampton are starting school with rotting teeth, according to new figures from Public Health England. They show almost 34% of 5-year-olds in Southampton have obvious signs of tooth decay. That compares to 26% on the Isle of Wight and 18% in Portsmouth.
A care home in Fareham has been rated as inadequate and had its entire management team fired following a damning inspection by the Care Quality Commission. In February, the CQC found 2 elderly residents at the Merry Hall care home on Kiln Road had been injured, which hadn't been reported to Hampshire Council. In a statement, the care home says it is working tirelessly to rectify the concerns and ensure residents' safety.
A car's crashed into a pizza takeaway in Worthing, badly damaging the building. It happened at Pizzarelli on Broadwater Road in Worthing at around 2:15 this afternoon. The car left the road and mounted the pavement before crashing into the shop. Chefs were inside at the time, but fortunately no one was injured.
Very lucky you're watching ITV News here in the Meridian region. Coming up, the latest weather forecast, but will it be good news for our gardens?
Well, from where I'm standing, the gardens are looking pretty good already, and the one I'm in has a burst of beautiful blooms that, if you know your onions, could bring tears to your eyes.
For more on all of our stories, head to itv.com/Meridian. Call us if you like or get in touch via Facebook or Twitter.
A service of thanksgiving to mark the 300th anniversary of the Wiltshire-based Royal Regiment of Artillery has taken place at Salisbury Cathedral. The Captain General's baton arrived at the cathedral prior to the service. It's travelled all over the world as part of the celebrations and will be handed to the Queen at a royal review later this month.
Well, I think any birthday is a very special day for anyone, but if you've got a 300th birthday and you've got a very proud history in the things you've done across those 300 years, it is important to mark it appropriately, and I think we've done it. We've shown real ambition, real endeavour, and I think we've done it with quite a lot of polish, so we're very proud of that journey.
Region's beaches have been making their headlines today, and that's because 14 of them have been awarded blue flags for being clean, safe and having good water quality. They include beaches from Sandbanks in Poole down to Southbourne in Bournemouth, also praised Swanage, Hayling Island, West Wittering, Hove Lawns and Brighton. Weymouth Beach has been given a blue flag for the first time in 15 years. Well done.
And the ITV Evening News continues with the national and international news at 6:30. Here's Mark Austin.
Terror fears over the plane that crashed into the Mediterranean. This is the aircraft that made two sharp turns before plunging into the sea. As families fear the worst, an Egyptian minister says terrorism is more likely than technical failure. Nearly 235,000 Vauxhalls Aferas are recalled for a second time over the problem that leads to this. And the Scottish Golf Club causing uproar for refusing to let in women members. Join Mary Nightingale and me at 6:30.
An artist who spent time in prison for forgery has found a better use for his artistic skills.
Indeed, David Henty from Saltdean in Sussex has discovered a talent for copying the work of masters like Van Gogh and Picasso.
David denies his paintings are fakes, but not everyone agrees. eBay, for example, has banned him. Malcolm Shaw has been to see some of his work.
Masterpieces beyond the wildest dreams of any collector of art. Works by Picasso, alongside paintings by Lowry and Modigliani. Except, of course, they're not. Every picture has actually been produced by David Henty, here in his home in Sussex. David's earliest attempts at copying earned him only a brush with the law when he was jailed for forging passports and car registration documents.
It was a long, long time ago now, but it was like another life. But yeah, and we got caught, we got sentenced, and something good came out of it. I always knew I could draw, but I never realised I could paint. Now people like buying them, which is great all round, you know. If you don't want to pay 157 million for a Picasso, you can buy one from me.
David's eye for detail means he can turn his hand to just about any artist he likes.
I like to deconstruct a painting, work out how they did it, and then put it back together. You know, and as close as I can, as close as possible.
Even though they bear the signatures of the original artists, David insists his paintings aren't fakes, but not everyone sees it that way. eBay banned him from selling through their auction site after a national newspaper accused him of cheating his buyers.
I had 1,000 positive feedbacks. I was a power seller. And, you know, I didn't say they were genuine, but, you know, people were happy. I had a lot of repeat customers. But when the Telegraph made a story out of it, obviously eBay took me off.
But it seems there's no such thing as bad publicity. David Henty is now being commissioned by people who want a masterpiece at a knockdown price and aren't really bothered who actually painted it. Malcolm Shaw, ITV News, Saltdean.
Well, another work of art of a different sort now. In less than a year's time, the aircraft carrier HMS Queen Elizabeth will sail into her new home of Portsmouth for the very first time. Preparations for her arrival are underway, and the man responsible for bringing her into port has already been appointed.
Yes, Richard Jones has been to speak to him and her crew, who are busy getting ready too.
She weighs 65,000 tonnes. She's 280 metres long and she's costing £3 billion to build. HMS Queen Elizabeth will be the most valuable ship ever to join the fleet. And when she arrives in Portsmouth, Admiralty pilot Tony Bannister will be responsible for her. Tony's job next year will be to bring the Queen Elizabeth, the biggest ship ever built for the Royal Navy, in through the narrow entrance of Portsmouth Harbour. It'll be a big responsibility, but he's confident he'll pull it off.
Even though there's 210 metres between Fort Blockhouse and the Round Tower, the channel we need to take the ship through is just 100 metres wide. And that gives us, with a 40-metre waterline beam, 30 metres either side, so there's very little margin of error.
To ensure her safety, the carrier will only come in when the tide is high and when the wind is below 15 knots. The channel into the harbour is being deepened and the approach altered, something her crew hundreds of miles away in Scotland are having to prepare for. Among them, the navigators who will be on the bridge.
For me, it'll be excellent because it'll be the first time I've seen Portsmouth in this new light. Unfortunately for the navigators who've done it for years and years and who are used to those head marks and beam marks, it'll be a bit different for them.
Queen Elizabeth is one of two new carriers heading south. The other, the Prince of Wales, is also taking shape in Rosyth and will also call Portsmouth home. Even though she only has a crew of 20 at the moment, construction is well underway.
We're desperate to get going, but we're using the QE guys and the girls as a source of knowledge. You know, they're a year, 2 years more experienced than what we are right now. So that the experience we encountered from them is priceless.
Queen Elizabeth might be a new ship, but her name isn't. Her predecessor, a battleship, served in the First and Second World Wars. In Portsmouth, memorabilia from her has already been found. History is important.
The ship was, I think, about 2/3 the size of the ship we have now, but there were something like twice as many people on board. I think there were about 1,900 when she was a flagship. So, and you know, if you kind of look at the ship and look at where she served, what she did, it kind of gives you some perspective that, you know, we're quite lucky the facilities that we have.
Where the first Queen Elizabeth went, the second will follow next year.
Any new ship arriving in Portsmouth, there's a sense of excitement, but carriers have a unique place in people's hearts. You saw it last year when the Theodore Roosevelt came into Portsmouth, and the sense of excitement around Portsmouth then. This is one of our own. I think it's going to be a monumental day in the life of Portsmouth.
It'll also be a monumental day in Tony Bannister's life. He started working in Portsmouth as a deck boy on tugs in 1967, but he has no plans to retire. He wants to be on board when HMS Prince of Wales arrives in 2018. Richard Jones, ITV News.
Wow.
Now, they knew they'd uncovered something exciting, but archaeologists in Wiltshire believe they've found a site that could be one of the most important in the country.
Yes, the discovery is just a stone's throw away from Stonehenge, but could have lain undiscovered forever if the army hadn't decided to build new houses there. Sally Simmonds now steps back in time.
They're digging deeper into the soil to uncover history dating back 5,000 years. The most striking feature of this site near Bulford are the two circular ditches around 30 metres across. Archaeologists recognise these as Neolithic henges, circular banks with an internal ditch.
Yeah, they're like a figure of eight really, and they're two components. Around here we've got an inner circle, which we think is probably a late Neolithic henge, probably about 3000 BC to 2500, with an entrance over there. That's that ditch. And then here we've got another one which goes around, again, broken by an entrance down there. And the ditch you see in the middle is part of a Bronze Age burial mound. So the monument has been later converted into a Bronze Age burial mound.
Through careful excavation and carbon dating, experts will be able to pin down the precise time people were here in the henges. They're sure the activity was special in some way, just not quite sure which way.
This is extraordinarily important in the sense that it is only a couple of K away from the Stonehenge World Heritage Site, and henges themselves are seen as non-functional spaces. They are probably ritual ceremonial in origin. We have, as archaeologists, to be bluntly honest, not the faintest idea of what they were doing in there.
Well, dotted all across the site are pits like these, and they've contained a right treasure trove of implements. Some chalk carvings, very unusual, axes, and it's the pottery that dates these to the same time as the henges.
The team here say the presence of the henges and pits together make this one of the most remarkable archaeological sites they've worked on. And as well as the Neolithic discoveries, they've recovered bones from an Anglo-Saxon cemetery. The army will get to build their houses once the archaeologists have finished, with the pair of henges preserved as a central green space between the blocks. Evidence from our ancestors 5,000 years ago, only discovered by chance when the builders moved in. Sally Simmonds, ITV News, Bulford.
Amazing. And now something else quite amazing. Nightingales, of course, they're one of our nation's favourite birds, but sadly their numbers are diminishing. They've fallen by 90%, would you believe, in the past 40 years.
But now a team of scientists are using brand new GPS technology to track the birds' movements, to understand why they're declining and what can be done to save the species. Tanya Mercer got up bright and early to join the team.
Nightingales are a mysterious and evocative bird known for their beautiful song. But their numbers are declining dramatically. Today, a team are up early to tag nightingales.
The nightingale's in heavy decline in Britain. We don't really know the full reasons why. Part of that's probably down to deer grazing and other habitat changes and habitat loss here in the UK, but we think that things that are going on elsewhere over the course of the annual cycle of the bird might also be affecting them. So we're putting these tags on to find out exactly what stopovers they use and also to look at the timing of their movements and where they move when they're within Africa.
It's not long before they catch their first one.
21.8.
Decent sized bird.
87 wing, yeah.
As well as taking the birds' measurements, they are for the first time putting new GPS tags on the birds, which are 10,000 times more accurate than current geolocators.
This is the world's smallest GPS tag, powered by the solar cell that you can see in the middle of the device, and it's got a elastic harness which is placing it on the bird's back between the wings, and it's looped around both the bird's legs. It's like a little rucksack that goes around its legs. There's the antenna there, so it's completely central to the bird's line of gravity.
This is all part of a joint project to find out what happens to these birds throughout the year.
This is a state-of-the-art, smallest GPS tag that weighs 0.9 grams. It will tell us where the birds are, so within a few metres. And then this time next year, when we recatch the birds, we'll find out exactly what they've been doing, which will be really exciting.
And this precise positioning will allow scientists to understand why the species is declining and inform future conservation to protect habitat areas for the birds.
This study is critical. It's not an exaggeration to say it's a race against time. The nightingale population has dropped by 90% in the past 40 years. Current estimates suggest there are around 5,500 males left in England, and only half of those are likely to find a partner and go on to breed.
Nightingales breed from around April to July here in England. Then they migrate thousands of miles down to Spain and on to West Africa. They were once common right across the country, but as numbers have dropped, they've contracted to just the far south and east, where they live in woodland undergrowth in remote areas. Given their preferred habitat, it is unlikely that a nightingale ever sang in Berkeley Square. The sad thing is, if more isn't done to save these birds, they won't be singing anywhere else in England either. Tanya Mercer, ITV News.
Beautiful.
Now, all across the region, gardens are in bloom. Oh, that reminds me, we were running a flower stall today in Brighton. Hello, if you were there. So we like flowers.
Lovely people.
Anyway,
well.
all around the region, gardens are in bloom. Walls are awash with wisteria, fences covered with clematis, fields full of forget-me-nots.
And if you don't have a garden, you can still appreciate the marvels of May at some of the region's most famous stately homes. And Simon has found the perfect example.
Well, it's a terrible job, but someone's got to do it. Here I am, whiling away the evening in the stunning surroundings of the walled garden of Arundel Castle, where they're about to have an allium explosion. And Martin, well, in a different life, these plants would in fact be in the bottom of our fridges.
That's right, Simon. They would have been onions. And so these have been bred from onions like garlic. But actually, if you let your onions flower or garlic, you might get some stunning flowers as well, but not of this size.
Well, let's have a look at the ones that we've got here. And these big purple bulbous ones here are named after a Prince song.
They are. This is Purple Rain. Absolutely stunning allium. One of my favourites. As you can see, they have lovely pom-pom shapes. And it just looks like purple rain. But there are some stunning alliums in borders. I mean, we've got the fantastic Gladiator.
They all have great names, don't they? So that's the tall one here, yeah?
That's a very tall one. And then further back in the borders, we've got things like Mont Blanc, which is a white one. And there's such a wide range of alliums. We have Christophii, Schubertii.
Things I've never heard of. But you have an awful lot of blooms to look forward to this year.
Yes, absolutely. We've got over 10,000. So we've got one of the biggest allium extravaganzas in the country.
And maintenance-wise, do they need a lot of work?
Relatively easy, especially if you're in a well-drained soil. And they'll just come back year after year.
So doesn't that put gardeners like you out of work?
Oh, not at all. We're always doing different things, so, you know, it just adds to the garden, and at least you're not buying something year in, year out.
Fair enough. You've justified your job, don't panic.
I'm working on it.
As far as the weather goes, could they do with a bit of a change in the forecast? Let's have a look.
From blizzards to pool, driving through Europe. Eurotunnel the Shuttle sponsors ITV Meridian weather.
Well, now how gorgeous are these irises looking? And if you're thinking they could maybe do with a bit of a watering, don't panic. They'll get plenty of that as we head through the weekend. But for tonight, it does start off cloudier than it has been through the day. And with that thicker cloud come a few spits and spots of rain. Nothing too major, just a bit light and patchy. And as it shifts away eastwards through the early hours, we'll see some clear spells developing. All the while, temperatures fairly mild, should stay up to around 11 or 12 degrees. So tomorrow morning, there will be some cloud around first thing, but don't worry, there'll also be some sunny spells and the clouds will break up quite nicely and it will be a very decent day, staying dry and fine, and in that sunshine just like today, temperatures should creep up quite nicely, 16, 17 degrees, which with very little wind should feel fairly pleasant if you are outside. But the cloud will start to thicken through tomorrow evening and then we'll see some rain arriving. As for your high tide times, well, you can see in Brighton 10:30 in the morning, then around 11:15 in the evening, and then Saturday, well, it won't be full-on rain all day, but there will be some very wet spells. It'll also be quite windy with it, with more showers to look forward to on Sunday.
Eurotunnel the Shuttle sponsors ITV Meridian weather. Keeping a close eye on summer. The Pollen Count, sponsored by Ilogy Eye Drops.
Well, it's probably not a huge surprise that the tree pollen levels in the fine and dry weather tomorrow will once again be high. But come the weekend, when it turns damp and windy, the good news is they will drop down to moderate.
Before we go, we'd like to tell you about something happening next month. ITV will be broadcasting 2 special live programmes on the EU referendum.
And we need you. If you want to be in the audience or have a question you want answered, then here's Julie Etchingham with details of how to get involved.
The EU referendum on June the 23rd will shape Britain's future. To mark this historic event, ITV will broadcast 2 special live programmes. The first, Cameron and Farage Live, the EU referendum, will be on Tuesday, June the 7th. Then the ITV referendum debate will air just 2 days later on Thursday the 9th of June, featuring politicians from both sides of the argument to remain or to leave the EU. We want to hear from you on the questions you'd most like politicians to answer on the EU referendum. Simply submit your questions in one of the following ways before Friday, June the 3rd, and you could be part of a live studio audience on one of these programmes to put to the politicians the issues that matter to you the most. Simply send us your questions to itv.com/referendum programmes, or you can email us on debate@itv.com.
And in just a moment, we've got the ITV Evening News with Mark Austin and Mary Nightingale.
Don't forget our late news with Stacey Poole and the last word with Phil Hornby, all coming up later. But for now, from the team here at ITV Meridian, thanks very much indeed for watching. Take care.
See you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.